You're watching Ask the Doctor. Thank you for joining the conversation. I'm Aimee Gutierrez, your host, and today we're diving into a subject that's quite familiar to most of us, that's weight loss. But our invited guest frames the subject in an entirely novel way with her book, Authentic You. Today's guest is none other than Dr. Nadine Plummer, ND, and she is going to answer all of our questions about weight loss. Thank you, Dr. Plummer, for being with us today. And before we jump into the hard side of weight loss, we want to talk about what's going right with us and going right with our bodies. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thanks, Aimee.
That's awesome. Now, what is something that stands out to you as being an amazing fact about our bodies and how we were created that just blows your mind when you think about it?
I think when we were studying, I just learned so many things in our anatomy classes, which was part of our studies at the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, where I went to school. Just in studying the eye is often kind of deemed to be like a miracle part of our body that might even show the existence of intelligent design, meaning an intelligent designer, perhaps God. And then studying the body in general, just the idea of even in the cell, at the cellular level, if you're looking at the way that insulin and glucose work together, all of these enzymatic kind of responses made me realize that we are incredible works of, you could say magic, but I would say works of a great designer. Even thinking of our circadian rhythm, cortisol levels go up in the morning, cortisol levels, they actually peak a little bit during the day, but then go down at night. Cortisol is an alertness hormone, so we're more alert in the morning, we are ready for bed at night. And the fact that we do nothing, usually, to make all this happen, with the circadian rhythm, except for wake up and go to bed.
That's just insane to me that so much is happening underneath our skin, in our skin, while we're not even thinking about it.
We're doing nothing.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, let's dive into a little bit about our weight loss history, where we are currently globally with weight. And it seems like it's an epidemic currently that we're facing. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of that and where you see that?
If you look at, statistics are changing a little bit with the introduction of weight loss drugs. But I remember looking at an article in The Lancet, which was looking at weight loss and obesity in 2024. And basically that article from The Lancet deemed that 3 out of 4 adults in America are in the category, and it might be according to BMI, of either overweight or obese. That's 3 out of 4. And it was deemed that there's a 140% increase in obesity-related disease in the last 30 years. That's within our lifetime, in the last 30 years. But overall, the statistics have been showing an ongoing increase in obesity.
3 out of 4. That is insane, really, when you think about it. That's pretty much everybody around us is struggling with this. We're struggling with this.
Many people.
A lot of people. So with these statistics, I know you've traveled all around the globe. How have you seen this play out between different countries? Is it fairly similar? What's come up to you as you've done your travels?
So I talked about this a little bit in my book. You mentioned it, Authentic You. The full title is actually Authentic You, a step-by-step journey to the habits beyond dieting. And in that book, I talked about the journey that someone experiences as they go to these different cultures. And part of it's based on my own travels. And what I noticed, at least at that time, was there was a big difference in the way that people ate. Like portion sizes in Asia, at least when I was there, and I lived in Asia for over 6 years, portion sizes tended to be smaller. And I also found that people tended to have, as far as I knew, not the same diseases, and people tended to be slimmer.
Amazing, that's so interesting. Now, in Western society, I think we have a lot of dieting that happens. We have this yo-yo effect of trying this new technique, maybe doesn't work. What have you seen about this and how it impacts our health overall?
It's interesting because I think there are two aspects of yo-yo dieting, which is also called weight cycling. there are two aspects. It's how yo-yo dieting or weight cycling affects the mind, how it affects the body. So I'll start with the body, but as we know, we are mind-body creatures, so the body affects the mind affects the body. But in terms of the body, when people lose weight, often they also lose muscle, depending on how they're doing it. And then when they regain the weight, which is part of yo-yo dieting, they're not necessarily regaining muscle, usually they regain fat. So the body composition changes with yo-yo dieting. Why the yo-yo dieting continues, because people feel like I'm eating less now, I feel like I have more fat on my body, and yet I'm not losing the weight, so they'll opt for something drastic. And then they'll lose weight, but they might be losing muscle, and then they regain the weight and they're regaining fat, and it's a cycle that goes on. So how does weight cycling affect the mind? We get into this scarcity mindset, the mind of this never-ending diet, like just not being able to enjoy food without then questioning, what did I eat and how many calories was that? And, you know, it can really raise anxiety levels, and you just don't have peace in your mind.
That's complicated mentally to go through.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, you had mentioned earlier about how this epidemic of obesity increasing. What do you feel like has led to this change over the last number of years?
I strongly believe and have seen in my practice this increase based on the pandemic. So a lot of people are eating or had been eating more overly processed foods like snack foods, junk foods, etc. And I think when people are in a state of anxiety, increased stress, they tend to eat more of those foods. People might have been exercising less. All of those, I think, were contributing factors to people just basically gaining weight during the pandemic.
That's fascinating. We also had some callers call in with some questions for you that we're going to hear now.
This is Jen. I'm actually trying to gain weight in a healthy way. So how does somebody gain weight in a healthy way?
Heavier meals that are healthy, maybe higher in fat content, a lot of combining carbohydrates with a lot of healthy fat. So helping with weight loss, I work with calorie density. So we're choosing foods that are low in calorie density and high in bulk. This person could do the opposite, choose foods that are higher in calorie density, meaning you eat a higher quantity of foods that are higher in calories, but they're still healthy foods. Nuts, seeds, avocados, nut butters, etc., and combining those maybe with an increase in carbohydrates.
It sounds like that still would be a very nourishing and fueling plan rather than just adding on empty calories at the end of the day.
Hey doc, I work out and eat mostly clean and count calories. With everything except popcorn, I absolutely gorge on popcorn. Will I have to stop soon?
There's so many things in that question. I don't really recommend calorie counting, but maybe it's working for him. But this gets into the question that we just talked about, which was the mindset of yo-yo dieting. And part of that is the constant calorie counting and this ongoing worry about how many calories. So I might even recommend to that person that they work with calorie density instead of counting calories. But in terms of popcorn, I heard the word gorged, which one of the things that they've found in the longevity studies is in these areas where people are living the longest around the world, people aren't gorging themselves. They're eating until they're about 80% full, but leaving a little bit of space. So there's a relationship between not gorging and longevity, let's say. Popcorn could be your dessert. So instead of snacking on popcorn, making popcorn maybe the final thing or part of your meal, so then you're not snacking between meals, which usually leads to better digestion. And then choosing popcorn that is air popped instead of popcorn that is fried.
Here's Johnny. Ozempic, a few of my friends are doing it, and I'm curious, is there any reason I shouldn't do it?
This could be an interesting question. So Ozempic is a GLP-1 receptor agonist, G standing for glucagon. When Ozempic came into Canada, it was given for patients who had diabetes and restricted to diabetes, and I think it was originally used as a diabetes drug because GLP-1 agonists can affect blood sugar. But they also found that it affects satiety levels as well. So people are less hungry and feeling full faster. It also affects motility, so the food is staying in the stomach, it's staying in the intestines for longer. So many other factors, I would discuss it with your doctor, but just thinking of these other effects aside from weight loss. How will it affect my blood sugar levels? Do I have an issue with blood sugar at all? Would I end up hypoglycemic by taking this drug and then be dealing with the side effects of hypoglycemia without even thinking that that might be a possibility? And then obviously the question, what are the long-term results of being on those drugs? Like after a decade, often people begin and they have to continue on that drug. There is a certain amount of weight regain after you go off. So what would the long-term effect be after years? And I don't know if the studies have been done on the long-term effect, 5 years, 10 years afterwards. So you'd have to keep that in mind as well.
Doctor, I know friends who have decided that they really need to lose weight to get to a healthy weight. And they know they need to learn how to change their diet to healthy diet. But they are using these GLP-1 agonists as an adjunct, meaning to help them lose weight, while they're learning to eat a more plant-based diet, so that when they start the medication, they'll be able to maintain that weight without staying on that drug forever.
I understand the strategy of thinking, okay, I'm just going to use this GLP-1 receptor agonist, let's say, for a short while to help me lose the weight as I make lifestyle changes. I would say the emphasis there is on the lifestyle changes. I have had patients who have been on Ozempic come off Ozempic during their weight loss journey, and they actually lost more weight due to the lifestyle changes than the drugs themselves. I think the more important thing is not to have the dependency on the drug. So why not just focus on the lifestyle changes, maybe without starting with the drug, so that you learn how to control your hunger, etc. The other interesting thing, if I could add, there was a book that was written a little while ago, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, where the author traveled across the world interviewing doctors, and it was particularly interviewing doctors on GLP-1 receptor agonists. I think he focused more on Ozempic, and they found that when people were on the drug and losing the weight, but the depression levels increased because there are many different reasons why people are overweight or struggling with weight, and sometimes it is a coping mechanism. So when that coping mechanism of food was taken away because of the GLP-1 receptor agonists, like they're not hungry anymore, they can't turn to food to deal with emotional issues, then they're just left with the emotional issues, and depression increased as well.
I feel like that's a great segue into some of our other questions, because I think we're going to touch on a couple of those areas and hopefully get some more feedback from you on those aspects of weight loss. From your global research, what's an intriguing cultural insight on weight and wellness that challenges Western views, perhaps something that inspired a key idea in your book?
One of the things I noticed when I was living in Asia, and it doesn't seem like a big deal, and I say big intentionally, was that the portion sizes there are different. Everyone here, as I looked around, eats less food, and they're just expecting that this is a regular portion size for a meal.
So they were almost just naturally hitting that 80% full that you were talking about earlier, right, leaving a little bit of room to not completely top up. Something you touched on here recently was about emotional eating and how it's often overlooked. Can you share some mind-blowing facts with us about stress and emotions and what part they play in what we're eating?
So there are so many answers within that one question. But a part of, I think, that drive to eat in response to stress is when we do eat, especially if it's something that we're enjoying, there is that little boost. Like I feel a little bit better when I'm stress eating. But then after the dopamine, then you don't feel that great. One of the things that happens with stress is our body increases our fight or flight hormones. So cortisol levels go up, adrenaline goes up. And I think we were designed that way. I could say that I believe God designed us that way to help us get out of stressful situations. But then with ongoing stress eating, cortisol levels are increased. And when cortisol is high, then hunger tends to be higher, our appetite increases, cravings increase, and ultimately we kind of save those calories, or we gain weight, particularly in the abdominal area. So there is a relationship between stress eating and weight increase.
That's fascinating. Prediabetes and metabolic issues are rising fast. What's a quirky, lesser-known sign of insulin resistance that could be a red flag for weight struggles?
It's interesting because when we were studying diabetes and different pathologies at school, we were told of this sign of insulin resistance that you can see on the skin, which is called acanthosis nigricans. So basically you get what looks like a rash, but it's darker than a typical rash. I had a patient who came to me. He mentioned that his father had diabetes. And when he put his arms in the air and he had short sleeve shirt on, I noticed that he had this dark patch under his arm. And I said, oh, that looks like something called acanthosis nigricans. I think you might have insulin resistance. And we discussed the family history of diabetes. I said, I think you should go and get your blood checked and let's see what your blood glucose levels were. And they were off the chart.
When this dark rash forms, does it come on, will it be there for a period of time? Does it have any other factors that you can share with us about it?
It normally stays because the insulin resistance is persistent and then blood sugar levels are higher. So people might think of it as a rash, but it's not like it comes and goes. It's like, oh, I suddenly have this patch of dark skin with a different color, and it's not going away.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So genetics get a lot of attention and a lot of blame for obesity in today's climate. What are some myths around that you can share with us? Is our destiny to just have obesity in our family if it's been in our past?
So it's an interesting question, and perhaps a combination of genetics, the gut microbiome, lifestyle, and just what we're accustomed to eating. Sometimes a question of, are we just doing the same thing that we're taught? Are we eating in the same way that our families ate, the same way that our mothers ate, grandmothers ate, grandfathers, etc., and what we've learned, or is it genes, or is it a combination of everything? They've done studies now on the microbiome and studies with rats and fecal implants where they're taking the stool, I was looking for a nice term, the stool of a rat who's living with obesity and putting it into the stool of a rat who's thin, and then that rat becomes obese and vice versa. So there's definitely a factor involved in terms of the microbiome, our gut microbiome, what we're eating, and how that is affecting the microbiotic populations in the gut that I think is not really focused on as much, and then lifestyle as well. So all of these things I think are factors.
That's crazy. So just making that switch between those two rats created a difference of what their weight was in the long run.
Their weight, body composition,
crazy,
etc.
to think of.
Yeah.
Wow. Toxins in our environment play a sneaky role. What's the most shocking toxin you found that's contributing to weight retention?
You know, I might say more clandestine. I think one of the toxins or chemicals that's found in a lot of foods, at least in Western societies and maybe even globally now, are obesogens. Obesogens are endocrine disruptors, things like BPA, things that are found in a lot of plastics, phthalates that we're not aware of. They're even airborne now. plastic straws, etc. And we don't realize that these plastics, some of them, have chemicals in them that are seeping into our food, that are seeping into our water. So in my book, I do have a chapter called It's Not the Food, because in that chapter, I'm referring more to it's our lifestyle, it's our choices, it is our mindset and our relationship with food and the way we're eating, why we eat what we eat. And then I have another chapter called It Is the Food, because it's these chemicals in the food, these natural flavorings, what are they? These newer chemicals that are being introduced in the overly processed foods, ultra-processed foods that we don't even know what they are. They're not actually named on the label. So are our bodies responding to these? Is it leading to fat accumulation? I think those are aspects that in these ways, it is the food as well.
That's incredible. Now, another topic you touched on briefly, I think in one of our questions, was sleep. Mm-hmm. How does sleep affect our weight? I know in your book you talk a little bit about how sleep can affect our hunger hormones and some of these other biological things that are happening in our body that we're not even paying attention to. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So what I mentioned earlier was cortisol, the fight or flight hormone. And what I think sleep is one of those unrecognized factors, let's say, in weight gain or weight retention or a weight struggle. So people don't realize that when they're not getting enough sleep, the next day cortisol, the fight or flight hormone, is actually increased. They have cravings, particularly for foods that are higher in sugar and unhealthy foods than they would have. And cortisol also increases our blood sugar levels. So by acting on the liver and causing the liver to convert its stored sugar in the form of glycogen, from converting that glycogen into glucose, then more glucose is then secreted by the liver into the blood. So blood sugar levels go up. Another interesting thing happens, you mentioned the hunger hormones, which is known as ghrelin. That hormone is secreted, causing our appetite to increase. It could even be secreted based on what we see, what we smell. So ghrelin is the hormone that increases hunger. We have a hormone that is like the inverse of ghrelin, or works in the opposite way in the body, leptin. Leptin is the hormone that increases satiety, so it makes us feel full. So we don't get enough sleep, cortisol goes up, the hunger hormones, the increase in ghrelin, decrease in leptin, and then we retain the fat in our abdominal area. So imagine if you're ongoingly not getting enough sleep, and then a lot of people wonder, why am I finding it so hard to lose weight? And not like adding in or looking at that sleep factor.
It seems like of all these topics that keep coming up, we could spend the whole time on one, just diving into it. I have so many questions that come to mind on sleep and how to, help improve that. And there's so many things that come to mind, but we don't have a lot of time. And I want to wrap up on a couple of quick questions that we have to finish. One of them is thinking about our resilience, self-compassion, self-love in all of the struggle that we can have between genetics, between emotional stress and high cortisol and all of that. How does having compassion for oneself play a part in weight loss?
I think that's an excellent question because just like sleep, it's another factor that's not really addressed or even recognized. This idea of having self-compassion as you go on this journey, and hopefully it's a journey towards better lifestyle, maybe a journey towards plant-based eating in the good way, whole food, plant-based foods. But just like giving yourself a little more room as you grow, as you journey. And the name of my book is It's a Journey, a step-by-step journey to habits beyond dieting, so to changing those habits. With my weight loss groups, I ask in presentations, what is the first step towards weight loss? And people throw out all kinds of things, intermittent fasting, drink more water. And my answer is the first step is love. The Bible says or directs us to love God with all of our hearts, all of our mind, all of our soul, to love our neighbors as ourselves. So, and the Bible also says God is love. I think this journey becomes a lot easier when you ask God for that self-compassion, for help just in making the lifestyle changes. Without that self-compassion, you could slash all the tires, meaning you feel stressed out, maybe you look to food for some kind of comfort, you eat the food, you get that dopamine hit, you feel a little bit better, but then your mind, your spirit is awash in guilt, in remorse, in resentment towards yourself. I'm going to practice self-compassion, recognize that I'm on a journey, so you don't get into that entire cycle of emotional eating. I think the self-compassion, the love, the asking God for help can cut that cycle before you get caught up in it.
I love the Bible verse you referred to about loving your neighbor, because who's our closest neighbor, really, right? It's ourselves in that piece. So thinking about all of these items that we touched on today, what would your top tips be for someone who's struggling with weight and wanting to make a change in their life?
So this could be an entire show, Aimee. Yeah. Top tips. I would say, interestingly enough, I'd start with the mind. Okay, maybe praying and asking God for help. And then changing your relationship with food. You could ask yourself, what is food to me? What does food mean to me? So this is trying to get to the root cause of why we eat the way that we eat. We have a relationship with money for our whole lives, a relationship with food. Sometimes there's a food addiction there. It's tough because we have to eat. So I'd start with the mindset. I would move that person to a whole food, plant-based diet. Eating times is very important. So if you're eating 3 meals, leaving about 4 hours to 4.5 hours between meals. So no snacking between meals. Not drinking with your meals, so you're not adulterating the salivary amylase that helps with breaking down carbohydrates in your mouth. Finally, loading, meaning making the heaviest meal of the day lunch and not dinner. So going light at night and making lunch the heavier meal of the day instead. I think those would be some good starting points.
That's amazing. You're right, that could be a whole segment in and of itself. Thank you so much for being here with us today. You've warmed my heart, and I'm sure the audiences as well, with so many great tips that I think a lot of us can take home and use to achieve better health. So thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. If you've enjoyed this week's episode of Ask the Doctor, please join us for the next episode as the conversations are still going. In fact, you can also be a part of them. So please submit your questions to askthedoctor@3abn.ca and leave a message with your question. Thanks for watching.